Like I said, thank you so much for having me today. One thing you're probably going to notice is, if you haven't already, is that each presentation and the way people have come to the field of genealogy is very, very different depending on, I guess, who you are, where you're from, and really how you start out. So to make things a little fun and entertaining, all of the questions at the tops of the slides I'm about to show you are actually things that have been said to me through the last decade or more of my time as a professional researcher, genealogist, speaker, everything else I can possibly throw in there. So I honestly don't remember a time when I didn't, quote unquote, do genealogy. I really, it's kind of hard. I honestly didn't know that there was a word that described what my grandmothers had me doing, if that makes any sense. Um, my mother was in college and then graduate school when I was little. My father owned his own business. My grandmothers took care of me, and we went to graveyards. We went and had tea and lunch with family members who were, more ancient than my grandmothers. And at that time, I thought 50, 60 years old, when you're like 4 and 5 was like, oh my God, why are you so old? But I enjoyed it, right? I could tell you my family back 4 generations on both sides because, as we walked through the different cemeteries, my grandmothers would tell me how I was related to all the different headstones or the pictures around their house. So I just figured it was a thing everybody did, and it was just part of everybody's family, but it wasn't something you could be employed at. How about that? It was a part of family life. It was how you shared your history, made sure people knew where you came from, but that was it. Okay. So I go through life. I get to that time when, in America, when you're, in high school and you have to pick, where you're going to go to university, where you're going to college. And it was time for me to choose a real job. And I went and got my bachelor's degree from Indiana University. I am a lifelong native Hoosier. I didn't know until I honestly became an adult that my family had lived anywhere else besides Indiana. Parts of my family were in Indiana before it was a state, so several hundred years. My mother was in the military and we moved around a lot. So I felt like I was going back home. That was one of the reasons why I picked it. And originally, what I wanted to be when I grew up was actually an athletic trainer. My mother was an orthopedic surgeon. She had done sports medicine. I had grown up following her around with a little metal, you know, I don't want to call it her toolbox, but it looked like a toolbox to me, full of tape and supplies and scissors and bandages. And that's really what I wanted to be. I thought 6 weeks at Indiana University, and I went, oh no, this is not exactly what I want to do. So I was the quintessential 18-year-old. I have no idea what I want to do with my life. Hey, I really like science and I really like teaching people. So that's what I'll do, right? I'll get a biology degree. I really love genetics. I'll become a teacher. I could do biology and chemistry. Oh, this sounds amazing. This is exactly what I want to do, until 3 years later when I had an argument with the education department and I said, nope. Peace out. I am not going to finish my education degree, but I still have my biology degree. And that's when I started discovering a lot of information about genetic counseling. And I was like, this is amazing. I still love genetics. I still love biology. I could become a genetic counselor. Yeah, I know it's a graduate degree, and that's a little intimidating when I was in school at the time. But it's really a passion. I could help people. I could work, in a various different ways. And it really, really excited me. So right before I graduated with my undergraduate degree, my now husband, my boyfriend at the time, and I sat down and he's like, listen, we can't afford it. At that time, there were only two places in the United States you could get a master's in genetic counseling. And he's like, we can't afford it. Why don't you work for a couple years? We're getting married, we're moving, we're buying a house. Yeah, I did a lot of stuff right out of school, which is really, really silly. um, he's like, let's settle down, let's give it a couple years, let's get some money in the bank, and then we can look at our options. So what I did, and you all, if you meet me in person, can ask me all about my days as I was hired to be a microbiologist at a corn processing factory, where they made gluten and corn syrup and grain alcohol and feeds and all sorts of things. So I can tell you exactly how you sniff and taste alcohol for impurities if you're ever interested in learning more about that. Well, that was about 18 months. About 18 months after I started working, actually back in the town I was born in, which my father was like, it took me 40 years to leave that place. What are you doing? And I think until the day he died, he questioned me on that occasionally. 18 months later, my husband and I had started a family. And it's another passion of mine because my son was born extremely premature. So I quit my job and I very, very quickly became a stay-at-home mom. And for somebody who is an active person who doesn't, at least at that time, I didn't want to sit at home. I was now isolated. My husband was traveling Monday through Friday, doing consulting work in various cities across the United States. And I would be at home 5 days a week by myself with an infant. And then 6 years later, his little brother. I, tried to keep busy. I joined clubs. I took my kids everywhere. We did everything together. I'm still not a very good homemaker. I've learned to cook over the last 30 years that I've been with my husband, but house cleaning and other things are still, I make that face quite often of that woman in that picture. But once again, I was able to educate my children, especially since we were living in my hometown, surrounded by literally hundreds of years of my family's history. They learned like I had learned, the same way my grandmothers taught me. Me still not realizing that there's a word for this thing, family history, genealogy. But I periodically was asked, even by my own family members, who really cares about this stuff? And like I said, my mother was a doctor. My father was a history teacher. History was a part of my life from the moment I essentially was born. His parents, my mother's mother, my father, everything was, every car ride was an educational opportunity. We were told lots and lots of facts and figures. And if my dad could tie it back into something that had happened to me or our family, it really made it come alive. So even though I love science, I also loved history. So it's 2023. So almost 20 years ago, we moved to Virginia. I currently live just outside of the Washington, D.C. area. And living here, having a nice time, found new friends, new clubs to join, new things to do. And my oldest brings home a family tree project. So a lot of people may be familiar with this. I don't remember having to do it when I was in school, but my husband remembers doing it when he lived in Texas in elementary school. I've heard from other people that it's a thing that's been happening for decades around in the United States at various ages. But in the state of Virginia, it's actually part of the curriculum in the 4th grade. Now, my son brought home the family tree chart from school, and he's like, I only have to fill it out to my great grandparents. I'm like, well, that's a smart teacher. Most people will know who their grandparents are, right? So he was supposed to interview his parents. That makes sense. And then he said the thing that always makes me giddy, which is, and I can get extra credit if I list more generations. I'm like, oh, honey, we've got this, not a problem. So I sit down with my son and we start filling out the family tree. And I go back, obviously, 3-4 generations for him without a problem. Don't want to have too much extra credits. We have a small piece of paper. And then I tell him when his father comes home, sit down with dad, ask him the questions. It'll be great. You're going to have so much fun. And my husband didn't really know any of the family past his grandparents. His parents just never talked about it. And his grandparents never talked about it. He knew the name of one of his great grandfathers, and he knew it was Gigi, great grandpa. And I just sat there looking, and I was like, how can you not know who your family is? How can you not know? It was mind-boggling to me because, like I said, I had grown up, right, with all this information, and I'd never thought really that other people didn't have it as well, that there should be some sort of passing down, right, of the family information. But I did know by that time that I grew up weird. So we'll give you that. I was a little of an odd child. So the next day, I took my youngest to preschool, and that meant I had 3.5 hours to myself in the morning. And I sat down and I started going through, typing into word engines, family trees, blah, blah, anything you could think of. So I still didn't know what the word genealogy was, believe it or not. And I stumbled across a whole bunch of different sites, including Family Search. This is 2010. I had never heard of Family Search. Little sheltered, right? Little sheltered from the community. And I got sucked in because by the time my husband came home at 8 o'clock that night, I had printed and printed and printed massive amounts. And look what I found. And to be honest, this is the way I was for the next week on the computer. He'd come home and he'd look at me and I'm like, you'll never believe what happened. Of course, I also learned very quickly in those first few weeks that, remember, I have a science background, right? And personally, I would never put out any information that was even quasi untrue. If I had a question about it, it would never have been published. So I learned a very hard lesson in that week that not all family trees are true and accurate. It's okay. It's okay. Y'all can laugh at me because I laugh at myself now too. But I was able to find out so much information, things that his parents didn't even know, some things that they were able to help me, clue in because I'd found some record or a name or a place. And they're like, oh yeah, I remember somebody mentioning that. And I felt like I was uncovering and adding to my children's family legacy, right? Because now they knew more about their father's side of the family. They knew about my side of the family. And to say within a week, I had been bit by the bug and became absolutely obsessed with family history would be an understatement. I'm just going to be honest with you. But it very quickly, As a young mother, I was in my early 30s at that time. Um, I actually got a lot of negative pushback from people. So those are my kids there. And as you can see, we do a lot of history things together as a family, especially living on the East Coast and in Virginia. There, you can't swing a cat without hitting something historical. So we have always gone out. I mean, my oldest right now is at university and he's volunteering at a historical day here in the county we live in right now. So it's always been important to involve them in it. And the bottom picture there is actually my children, my parents, and myself at the 2013 national, was it national? No, it was the FGS conference in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It was easy to get them to go since we're from Indiana. But like I said, I was getting pushback. Older members of genealogical societies, one, I would get told, why are you bringing your children to the library? Why are you bringing your children to the archives? And let me tell you, when a 5-year-old can load your microfilm reel better than you can, it makes you be quiet real quick. And that they can sit there and read silently and be less conspicuous and noisy than some adults gives you pause. But I couldn't understand why. Why would it matter? They want to learn about their history. I want to learn. Just because I'm young, just because I have a family, does not mean that I should push things off until I'm retired. Priorities are different with modern men and women and families. If you choose to have children or not, it shouldn't be a reason to limit your activities if you have the means and the availability, the will to, the know for all, the whatever you want to call it. I just drug them with me, it made more sense that way. And it gave them a better appreciation. And it gave, I think, a lot of older members of our community a reason to stop and think. Just because somebody is young, just because they have a family or they're married or they have children, doesn't mean they don't have the experience, they don't have the knowledge. And let me tell you, as soon as people realize that I have a degree in genetics, that was one of the very first things that I was asked to do for some of the local societies I was involved with. Get up and start teaching. What is DNA? How is it inherited? How do these DNA tests work, right? Because obviously if they need you, they need you. They just have to find a reason. So really quickly, I started moving in a variety of directions. I quickly realized that one, I'm a stay-at-home mom right now. As the time came closer for my youngest to start elementary school and will be gone for 8 hours a day, I was honestly going, oh my God, what am I going to do with myself? It's been like 10 years since I've been by myself for more than a day for that long of time. So part of me was like, I need to go out and figure this out, right? I've started collecting files. I've started researching on the internet. I'm reading books. I'm trying to educate myself on how to do proper research or learn about what is and is not available in the different places that my family have come from. And while I found it fun, I realized that, I haven't had a job in a while. It would kind of be nice to myself, not only contributing to my family income, but maybe being able to put some of that aside for things that I'd like to purchase for myself. Or, as somebody who is a stay-at-home parent, now my dad was a stay-at-home father, so I understood this. It was important to him also to have an individual stream of income coming in, and we didn't have to ask my mom for money all the time. And it's kind of weird to ask your partner for money so you can buy them a present. And yeah, I know some of you may be shaking your heads at me, but it was one of those things. Yeah, we had joint bank account. My husband was the breadwinner, and I wanted to start contributing, and I wanted to have a little bit of my own money. Um, so what I did was I was out online one day, and I found a blog post from Family Tree magazine here in the United States. And they were advertising for a beginning genealogist to become what was called their Family Firsts blogger. And it had to be somebody who had been doing genealogy significantly for less than a year. And you had to submit a 500-word essay on why, why they should choose you and why family history is important to you. And I won the contest. It completely blew me out of the water. I never thought I was a good writer. I had been told specifically multiple times growing up and in college that I could write an awesome technical report, but I was not a writer. I had no feeling, all those wonderful things that journalism and English teachers tell you. But I won it, and it made me so happy and so excited. So the next year, so that was in November of 2011 through to December of 2012, I wrote weekly, if not every other week, blog posts for Family Tree magazine. If you do some deep hunting out there on Google, you may still be able to find it. There was a woman who was the Family First blogger before me, and then there was someone after me, and then they stopped doing it. But I was able to, as part of my package, and if you can't tell, I'm a bit of a reading obsessed, educational, give me all the data information type sponge nerd person. And part of the prize was I could take any of their classes that they offered through Family Tree University for free. They asked that I write about them, which is fine by me. I could also order any of the books that they had in their Family Tree store, which, let me tell you, that's amazing for a bibliophile to be able to go through a book page and say, I want that and that and that and that, and order one of everything was absolutely amazing for me. Kind of freaked my husband out when the boxes started to arrive, but that's a whole nother story, and a whole new house with my own office 15 years later. But yeah, I loved it. I was able to write about what I was finding, what I had learned, how I had put various information to test. And I started my own blog at the same time as a way to, because you only had 500 to 600 words for Family Tree. So I actively started blogging a lot. More information than what I could put on at Family Tree, additional things I was finding, information that they didn't publish that I thought people should know about. And that just grew and grew and grew. And it was how people started finding me so that I could speak more, especially when I started adding information about, oh, I'm talking at my local genealogical society. This is what it's about. And people started contacting me. And it was like, oh my God, why are they contacting me? And my husband's like, do I really have to explain this to you? It's because you're putting out good information and they want to hear more from you. And it honestly was very hard for me to hear for a while. That first summer, after I was selected as the Family Tree First blogger, I was able to write my very first article for Family Tree magazine, which the first time you see your name in print can be a little daunting. Can be a little like, ooh, okay, this really happening? And from there, I've written consistently for them. And in addition, I've been a presenter for their Family Tree University, which is absolutely amazing. I love working with people and teaching them. Maybe I should have been a teacher, right? Second chances. So part of me still kind of felt that maybe I was missing something, because I'm still I don't have that journalist degree or that English or history or a librarian or archivist degree. Maybe I'm still looking for something. So I decided that I needed to really kind of look at maybe the different certificates that are out there, or besides just reading the book myself, to make sure that I'm understanding the information. Maybe I should try some taught or some independent study type courses. So I convinced my husband to let me try the Boston University certificate program, which is a 15-week course taught through Boston University, with some amazing instructors, and there's actual, papers and grades, and you turn things in. And I had not been at school for over 10 years at that point in time. So I was a little intimidated, but I took it on, passed with flying colors, and then I wanted more, because now the bug is like really setting in. And I'm like, wow, okay, so that wasn't too hard, wasn't too easy, but it wasn't too hard. And I've learned a lot, and I've made some new connections and some new friends. So that's when I discovered, at that time, it was the National Institute for Genealogical Studies. It's recently changed its name to the International Institute. And I cornered the former owner, Louise Sundeny, at a conference, and convinced her to let me take courses from her, and I would blog about them. Because let's see, a savvy business person, I'd already done it once. I could show her how I blogged for Family Tree magazine. And that's how I earned my professional learning certificate in genealogical studies, specializing in American records from the National Institute. Is I traded my skills and services as a writer and reviewer, and promoted the Institute as I took the classes. And I was pretty brutal in some of my blog posts. If I didn't like something, I did not hold it back. And that took me 18 months to finish those 40 courses. And you can take as long as you want, which is one of the nice things about that. You can kind of do it at your own pace. 6 months before I finished, I then also joined the Professional Genealogy or ProGen Study Group, which is another 18-month course where I was ProGen 28. So that's how long ago it was. And I met some more great people. I built my confidence, because for me, I'm not necessarily, believe it or not, I'm a bit of an introvert, and I am not a very confident, outgoing person. I make myself be, especially if I am presenting or I am in front of a group of people. But I'll let you know that when this is over, I'm going to go downstairs, probably have a glass of whiskey and watch TV for a couple hours, just to kind of go, ooh, because it takes a lot for me to talk. It takes a lot for me to be in a performance area. And those trolls, as Lisa said earlier, can really do a lot of damage to me. So sometimes I make my husband read critiques, and then he gets to filter it for me. And I thought I was doing really well. I was where I wanted to be. I was, I had read and connected with other people. I've hung my shingle out. I'm being a professional genealogist now, client-based research, lots of writing, presenting lectures, a little bit of everything. But I was still, believe it or not, getting asked, do you actually make money as that? That's a real thing. You can be a genealogist. I've never heard of that. How many times I've had to tell people that, no, I don't study rocks. That's geologist. Or you can just, go with the ologist with a G. All the different ways and mispronunciations and misunderstandings I have come across in my line of work. But it's the best thing I've ever done. right? I've met people, I've learned things, I've been involved with communities. I helped with the Next Gen network, genealogy network, when it first got started. Um, because like I said, the negative comments from older people, as well as people who didn't think, someone with children should be in the archives and researching, really hit a nerve with me. So once I finished my ProGen studies, my institute studies, I gave it a rest for a couple years. I actually started working as a staff genealogist at a lineage society in Washington, D.C. Um, I have a fascination with lineage societies, and that's for a whole nother conversation. So for me to be able to commute into DC, have a real salaried position, be able to work with so many different types of original records and research at an institution that's well over 100 years old. I loved working with the papers. So if you can read between those lines, I love the research. I love the papers. I love the library I had. I didn't necessarily love working with the membership, which is eventually what made me leave. And at that point in time, I was also being questioned about why I hadn't become certified in anything. Are you going to get your accreditation? Are you going to go through BCG? And to be honest with you, I had a little bit of a pause about it. I'd had some negative type run-ins with members from both. I really didn't like the way, even though there was a rubric for evaluation, it was still very, at that time, not objective. It was very subjective. And I didn't like the thought of having to every few years pay more money to somebody to subjectively look at my work and to say, yes, you're good enough to be with us. So instead, what I did was I started looking at graduate school. I'd actually talked to Lisa about her time with her master's in fine arts and doing maybe a writing degree. I had done all sorts of different research opportunities, and graduate school in the United States is horribly expensive, especially when I was thinking to myself, within the next decade, I would have to be paying for one child to go to university, and then within 5 years, another child to go to university. Could we as a family do that? And fate stepped in, and in 2016, I went to Glasgow and spoke at the International Congress for Genealogical and Heraldic Studies. And that's when I was introduced. And I'll be honest, I kind of had been stalking the University of Strathclyde from conference to conference for a while, but I was really introduced to the campus, the people. And by the time we had got onto the flight back in London to come home to Virginia, my husband and I had worked through that. Yes, we could afford to do this as a part-time program. So I started at the University of Strathclyde in the fall of 2016. And I did it part-time, which means my first year was my postgraduate certificate. My second year was the postgraduate diploma. And then the third year was the Master's of Science in Genealogical, Paleographic, and Heraldic Studies. And it was the best 3 years I've spent. I did it online. I did go every year back for the student trip, which was held in November. Got to meet some amazing people from all over the world, see different repositories, libraries, and archives in the Glasgow, Edinburgh area, and absolutely loved it. And then halfway through my last year there, when I was getting ready to turn in my my master's dissertation, they came out with a notice that starting that fall, or within the year, they would be offering a PhD in history with genealogical studies. And my husband read it, looked at my face and went, no, 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 you've got to take a break. You've written, at that time, I had written 3 books. A 4th book was getting to be ready to be written. I'd been published in multiple different magazines, guest blogs all over the place. I had a speaking schedule where I was speaking almost every weekend, and sometimes 1 to 2 nights a week during the week. And honestly, he was a little worried about burnout, because even if you love it, if you start doing stuff too much, it can be a real problem. So I decided, okay, I'll take a year off. I passed with distinction, which made me very happy. I worked my tail off for that master's degree. My husband and I, in November of 2019, but you see where this is going, flew to Glasgow. He watched me graduate. That's me in my robe with my master's hood on. We flew back home, and there was, this outbreak of flu in Europe. And then I went to Roots Tech, and that week when we were at Roots Tech in that February of 2020 is when everybody started coughing. People started wearing masks on the flights home. And within 3 weeks of that, obviously the pandemic had happened. And everything I had on my books, white out. Now, luckily, because I've diversified a little bit, I was able to still have a slow trickle of income coming in. And since my husband was still, working as a consultant and full-time, I was lucky in that it didn't hit us as hard as it had some other people. But it made it clear that if I had only been a one-trick pony in my business, I would have been in deep trouble, deep, deep trouble. But it also meant that I had a summer to sit around and do nothing. So I actually started my PhD. It was almost a year later, in the fall of 2020, which is, I'm finishing my 3rd year as a part-time, and I technically have 3 more years until I have to be finished with it. So it's a 6-year part-time program. And I love it. Do I have to have a PhD in genealogy and history? No. Have I always wanted to put doctor and PhD after my name? Maybe. But it also, to me, is an outward sign that I have been educated. I know my stuff. I can at least write, and I should know what I'm talking about. Now, obviously, not everybody knows everything. So there are, holes in my education, but the things that I'm specializing in, to me, having an academic degree that can never be taken away from me was more important than having a certification by a body that, at the time when I was looking at it, to me, was a little more subjective, because I am now a member of the Register of Qualified Genealogists of the United Kingdom, which is purely showing that, yes, they have gone through this academic program and have passed successfully. So if you've passed a graded rubric, outlining detailed, program, you should be good to go. Now, this is where I want to say genealogists, I mean, the 3 of us and the woman coming in after me, we're all going to have different routes and avenues and backgrounds and information to share with you. But the one big thing I want to make sure that you can take away from today is that a genealogist isn't just one thing. A professional genealogist can do lots of things, and there's lots of components to it. You can do client work, or if you really don't like working with people, don't do client work. You can write not only professionally as an author of books or magazine articles, but you can also do it for yourself by putting out blogs and newsletters or writing for local societies. You can teach on a small level, you can teach through Zoom, you can teach at large conferences. But the three other things besides the work aspect, I really think are important is one, I don't think, unlike 100 or more years ago with genealogy, where it may have been, the person working by themselves studiously and laboriously in a archive somewhere. Now in the 21st century, it's about networking. It's about staying connected with people all over the world. You will learn so much more that way, not only professionally, but personally. The connections can be amazing. Volunteer work, and this can be a little controversial. I like giving back to communities. So I have volunteered to serve on boards or to help with conferences. One, I like to see how the sausage is made behind the curtain. So by volunteering to help various organizations, I actually get to learn about why things are done certain ways, historically, if they can change, maybe, suggestions on how newer processes can be put into place. So it not only allows me to see why and how things are done, but it gives the organizations a fresh point of view. And if people stop volunteering, that's when we run into problems with a lot of our organizations and societies. And then community involvement, and not just genealogy community. I'm talking about where you live. So one of the things that I've been really blessed and really happy to be involved with, not only where I live now for the last year, but where I used to live in a different way, is I've been doing a lot of elder study programs. That's what they're called around here. So I've worked with 2 different community colleges who have elder study programs. So older members of the community can come in and learn, and I teach genealogy. Or let them ask me questions about how to do things. And then from September to March of this past year, I went to 2 different assisted living facilities and aided the residents in their own genealogical research as a way to give back. Because one, it helped my skills, because they would come in with a random question and I would go, let's find out, let's figure this problem out together, right? But it also was a way that I could give back to my community, to people who really appreciated it and wanted the information. So now that I've talked your ear off for almost 45 minutes, I hope the big takeaway that you have for me is put yourselves out there if you can. You may not do it right the first couple times you try, but it's more important that you try to put yourself out there, get to know people, learn. To me, education, self-education is extremely important. If you need a little bit more of a schedule and structure, there are places out there to help you. And don't think you can't. I mean, all you have to do is try. Put yourself out there and try and see what sticks. Throw that spaghetti against the wall, see if it's done. And on that note, I hope you are going to have a great day and enjoy the next couple presentations.